topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Experts show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. And I want to welcome today, we've got a great show today. We're gone to a new format, whereas now you can actually write your questions in during the show, and you can actually text us questions. We'll be giving out our text number, and we have got a ton of questions from you. Our first show is brought to you by the managing attorney of the Dean Law Firm in Sugar Land, Texas. She's also the owner of Dean Law Firm. It's an estate planning boutique law firm. It's located in the Sugar Land area, but it doesn't matter. You can be in any part of the surrounding Houston area. She's been practicing law for over 30 years, opening up her own law firm 16 years ago to provide a different kind of legal experience. And I am telling you, because I do this all over the United States, I do it every week. I've been doing this for 10 years. I can really tell the ones that really care. And our expert attorney, Julia Dean, really does care. Good afternoon, attorney.
Hi, it's good to see you, Steve. Thank you.
Always good to see you. And we got the holidays coming up, and I think we all needed it. We needed to be able to sit back, take a deep breath, maybe sit down with the Lord and let him take on all of our problems we're having. Things are going to get better, much better, folks. I promise you that. So this is our new format now. And we've got so many questions that have been sent in for attorney Julia Dean. One of the first things I want you to know is please write this phone number down if you're listening on radio. It's 281-277-3326. That's attorney Julia Dean. That's her phone number. And you can also go to her website at www.juliadeanlaw.com. We have got all types of questions as in regards to estate planning. And I'm going to tell people this. I don't think there's a better time than now to start planning. Don't hold it off. And we hope that you're going to learn a lot today, things that you probably didn't know. And just sit back, take notes, and make sure that you, maybe like Tuesday, I don't know if you're open on Monday or Tuesday, Julia, but
we're open Monday. Mm-hmm.
You're open Monday. Okay, so Wednesday we want people to call, or Monday, set up an appointment with attorney Julia Dean. The first, we're going to go to Galveston first. We have George, Julia. He says, why does, the English isn't so good. Why does a young family need to have an estate planning?
That's a good question. I know we think of ourselves as not always needing that when we feel good and we don't see that, sickness or death is on the horizon. But we really never know when that will happen. And we never want to leave our family, our spouse, our children unprotected. And so if we plan, then we can just not have to worry about that anymore. Have peace of mind that if something did happen and you ended up in the hospital and couldn't pay your bills and didn't have the capacity to handle the things with your children, you've already have someone in place to watch your children and to be guardian. If your spouse couldn't do it too, say you're both in the car accident, you've named someone, even if it's just temporarily, as your guardian. So we're not having the state come in and decide who is going to watch over your children. I mean, that's such an intimate decision that's so important. You want to have some say in that. And so just be sure that you have taken the time to have that written down with an attorney so that it will hold up in court and we can go ahead and know who you want there. Then we also need to make sure that your family is taken care of. So if something happens, that we can get access to those assets and we're not waiting to get access, especially in disability. What if your assets are locked up and we can't pay your bills? That could really put a strain on a young family. It can put a strain on anyone, but especially a young family where things may be more, paycheck to paycheck. We don't want to have, we don't want to be waiting months to get access to those funds if we don't otherwise have access. So planning both disability and legacy of how we want to pass things is so important.
Yeah, I guess I hate to bring these names up, but these are names that people have heard of. There's people like Prince. There's people like Larry King, Terry Shively. Do you remember Terry Shively?
Terry Schiavo, I think, yeah.
They weren't prepared, were they?
No, they weren't prepared at all. And she was young. I mean, she
Yes.
was a car accident, I believe, in her 20s, and she was on artificial life support for 10 years at least. And so it was a big legal fight there. So, yeah, you never know. My own daughter passed away at 33 with COVID. And, nobody expected that. It just hit us, and it hit her hard. And she didn't have time to plan. When she went in the hospital, it wasn't long before she was on a ventilator. And she wasn't in her right mind to do things, but fortunately she had planned. She had everything in place. She had even decided where she wanted cremation, where she wanted her ashes scattered. Those are things that were such a gift to us that I can't tell you how much of a gift that was to us, to know exactly what she wanted. No one was having discussions on that. We just implemented what she wanted. And so it's an incredible gift when someone has forethought and has put into place a strategic plan so that, regardless of the age, we may be dealing with this. And I think our society is starting to know that, just because of COVID and what's happened. So it's become more and more in the forefront of people's thoughts. But, it could happen anytime, a car accident, an illness that strikes us, and we don't have time to plan. I mean, we do our best when people are sick and we try to get to the hospital, and we, sometimes we're outside even of a nursing facility or assisted living, to try to do the documents however we can. But we will do whatever we can, but sometimes there's just not time to plan anymore if we haven't thought about it beforehand.
And, Julia, people don't realize that after they pass, that your loved ones still have to do all the work after that.
That's right.
And you want to try to make it as easy on them as possible.
That's right. And just having a disability plan, having a legacy plan, whether it's a will or a living trust or other ways, we're thinking about, just each of your assets. Is it taken care of? I'm always amazed how some people feel like everything's in place, but they've left one or two assets. And now we're doing, probate we didn't have to do because one or two assets are out there. Or they just haven't thought about their children and their young children, what's going to happen to them. And now we have the family fighting over which grandparent's going to take care of it, or a sibling are going to now have the children. and who's going to manage their money, and because they can't manage their money. So does it stay with the court? Does it go to a corporate trustee? If you don't think that costs more money, you're wrong. It costs a whole lot more money to fight about it afterwards when we don't have a plan. So it's an act of love to pre-plan beforehand.
Julia, I think people, when they see the word or the words estate planning, estate, in their mind, they feel like they have to be a multimillionaire, and that just isn't the case.
No, it could be any asset at all. But even estate planning, even if you had no assets, let's say you have zero in the bank account and no other assets, no personal property, anything, then you still have to have a disability plan. And that's part of your estate plan. And that's who would take care of you if you make your medical decisions and make your living decisions if you can't do that anymore. So there's many pieces to an estate plan. And I know it does kind of imply wealth. But it applies to everybody.
I got to tell you, people can think they know everything there is to know about estate planning because it's them personally. But when you have an attorney like Attorney Julia Dean, you've got this list in your head, and there's so many things on there that we probably never even think about that are so important, but this is what you do.
It is. And actually, I came from a litigation background. I did commercial litigation, and then I did civil appellate law. So I've seen every kind of litigation in every different area, very little in criminal, but enough to know, that I can spot those issues that are going to come up. And we're going to address those. So the documents that we do, they're all customized and they're very comprehensive. And they're comprehensive because we don't want a situation where we do have to go to court and argue over something. We want it spelled out and we want it very clear. And we want to have mechanisms where we can do this outside of the court and the court costs too. So we even have that inside there. So I'm always thinking about what if, it's always the analysis of, okay, if this fails or if this law changes, and how are we going to protect you? And then we need to think about things like taxes. Are you going to is your estate subject to taxes?
Oh, that's very important.
I just lost you, but there we go. Okay. But is your estate subject to taxes? Do we have any unprotected assets that we could do something and now protect them from creditors and lawsuits and divorces? And, just how are we going to manage that money for our children or for our loved ones or our grandchildren? And what kind of plan do we want for the future? So we're thinking about all that, and not just who's going to receive it, but how they're going to receive it and what's the best way for them to receive it.
Here's a question. This is Nick in Sugarland. Hi, Julia. I love your show. This must be one of your relatives. I love your show.
Thank you.
What are the components of a good estate plan?
Oh, yes. So some of that I just talked about, but I think let's go into a little more detail on that, because I think the good components of a estate plan are kind of twofold. I kind of mentioned a legacy plan, and by that I mean how we pass our assets and what does it look like, and how are they going to receive it, and do we have internal trust planning in there or not? Do we have an overarching trust on that? Is it in a will? Do we want to do asset protection, divorce protection, or tax planning? So those are the main components of your legacy plan. Then we have your disability plan. Your disability plan is what happens to you when you can't make decisions on your finances, for your healthcare expenses, for your living expenses. Who's going to make that for you? And so then for that, we have financial powers of attorney for the financial matters. We have medical powers of attorney, someone to make your medical decisions, but only when you can't. So just because you name someone doesn't take away your ability to do it while you have capacity. It just means when you can't do it, they step in. And so with a medical power of attorney, it allows for one doctor to decide, okay, you can't make that decision. And that's primarily because we need to make that decision quickly. Usually with a financial, we have 2 independent doctors that need to make that decision for you. But with one on the medical power of attorney, if they decide, no, you can't make a rational medical decision, or maybe you're in surgery, or, you just can't make it at that point in time, you have named someone who can step in and make that decision for you. And then we usually like a couple alternates on that as well. Some people like to have more than one making that decision, which is okay if they get along together and you think they can work together. That's not something I recommend, but if you do that, then just have an out, where we can say, okay, but however, if there's an emergency situation and we can't reach both of them, that one of them can make that decision. So we always kind of have an out on that. Then we have a HIPAA authorization. So the HIPAA authorization is just an acronym for the Healthcare Privacy Act, which prevents anyone, that includes your spouse, your adult children, your parents, no one can have access to your healthcare information without your explicit written consent if you don't have capacity. So what happens if you're in a car accident and you're in the hospital and you can't give that authority, then no one can get to that. No one can talk to the doctors and nurses about you, and they're making decisions for you. When you really wanted someone else to make it, especially if you don't have your medical power of attorney, you don't even have anyone who can call in and talk to them. So maybe you have people on your medical power of attorney, but other people, maybe your spouse or your adult children, are making decisions for you. But if your parent calls in, you would want them to be able to talk to the doctors, nurses, or maybe a sibling, and so you can list them too. So this would function at any hospital, any doctor, any lab or medical facility. The nice thing about that versus every time you go in, I'm sure they have asked you, who can we talk to about your medical condition? Yes. And you have to write their names and numbers. Well, that functions for that doctor or that hospital. But the problem comes when you end up with another doctor, another hospital, and we don't have that authorization beforehand. So it can be a really terrible thing if you're not able to express that, and now your family and your spouse or loved ones are not getting any kind of communication with the hospital about that. So we definitely want that in place too. There's also a couple other medical documents. So one's a directive to physicians. That is sometimes called a living will, and that's how a lot of people think of it, kind of like the Terry Schiavo situation. Right. Where she was in a car accident, ended up on artificial life support for many, many years. And eventually her husband wanted it removed and wanted a divorce. And her parents wanted to keep her on there. And so there was a court battle. So this would be preventing that kind of situation. You would speak for yourself beforehand. This is what I would want. In Texas, we can decide in 2 scenarios. In a terminal condition, this would be defined as your doctor believes that you have less than 6 months to live. If so, you can decide, okay, I do want artificial life support, or I don't want artificial life support. And also in or irreversible condition. So a terminal, less than 6 months to live, or an irreversible, which could go years and years, like the Terry Schiavo situation. Could be something like Alzheimer's disease. At some point at the beginning of it, you could make a rational decision. But at some point, you're not going to be able to make that. And you're saying just beforehand, I don't want these interventions, or I do want these interventions. So what are those interventions? Right now, it's heart-lung machines, ventilators, kidney dialysis, tube feedings, and IV fluids. So let's say I want IV fluids, but I really don't want the rest. You can say, yes, in a terminal condition, I want IV fluids, but I don't want the rest of these. Or maybe you say, I want the interventions, but I want it limited in time. I don't want it going on for years and years. So let's say, let's try it for 7 days or 30 days or whatever you choose, we can limit it. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And the last major medical document would be a do not resuscitate order. We do out of hospitals. The hospitals do their own do not resuscitate, or DNR. So an out-of-hospital DNR would address the situations where you had a heart attack and you call, or someone calls 911 on your behalf. If they know you have a DNR, they would not shock your heart back and get it going again. They wouldn't do any active airway management. So if you want a chance, you want to get to the hospital and have them intervene and at least see, and maybe tried to turn this around, and maybe that's really basically all you need, or a stent or whatever to keep things going again, then you would have that option to get there if you don't have a DNR. But if you have a DNR, they would not do those things. And so really it's those people that are more at end of life and they don't want any more interventions, or they have been so ill for so long, they really have decided no more. And that's when we see people doing the DNRs.
Where do transplants come in? Like if you want to donate an organ, where do those come in at?
Oh, good question. So in Texas, we can say on our driver's license, whether or not we want to be an organ donor, and allow people to use our organs for transplant. So generally, if they know that you want to be an organ donor, they will, have artificial life support until they can, get someone there to keep things going. Yeah. So it does change the dynamic a bit, but it wouldn't be for very long.
And what about, I've heard the expression executor. Shelling and West Houston want to know, what does an executor do?
So an executor, there's different kinds of personal representatives, and one is an executor. So when we have a will, an executor is the one who is named to take your will through probate process, which is a court-ordered process to determine, yes, it's a valid will. So once the judge says, yes, you are qualified to be executor, admits the will to probate, and gives you what's called letters testamentary, now you are functioning as executor. So although you were named before, you don't have any authority until the court says you do. So once a court says you do, and you have that letters testamentary, that's when you have the power to take care of the assets of the person who passed away. So that would allow them to gather the assets, secure them, to pay bills, to sell a home or sell other assets and gather those assets together. Usually in an estate account, they pay the taxes, they pay funeral expenses, pay last expenses, they keep the house going until it's sold. They're responsible for keeping custody of all the assets of the person who passed away. And then according to the will, then they would make distributions out to the beneficiaries once they've handled everything. Sometimes if we know that's going to take a while, we might do a partial distribution as the executor to the beneficiaries, hold back a good, retainer with a good cushion, and then allow us to finalize tax returns or other things, and then make a final distribution. So we don't always have to wait till everything is completed before we make that final distribution. But we do want to make sure that we have a good handle on what's out there. If there's any bills that could come in because of last illnesses, we want to make sure we have enough to cover that. Now, when they make the distributions out to the beneficiaries, if it's outright, then they're done, and they might get receipts and releases, for their work. But if it's in trust and they make a distribution to the trustee, they may or may not be the same trustee that manages it. So I think one of the other questions that came in was also about a trustee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I think John from Friendsmith had talked about, what is a trustee? So kind of in the same vein, both of them are fiduciaries. They have to do everything in the highest, they're under the highest duty under law to do everything in the beneficiaries or the estate's best interest. So for a trustee, now let's say it goes to your child in trust. And now we've named a trustee who can manage your child's money. And so that can be, if the child is an adult, it could even be the child. But let's say it's someone else. Let's say the aunt is managing the funds as trustee for your child. Then what that means is they would invest the funds. They would make decisions on, they might work with a financial advisor on the investments. They'll work with the CPAs. They'll handle the tax returns, and they'll make the distribution decisions for your child. So let's say, the child is now going to college, and so she can make payments directly to the college, or she can, pay for rent or other things, or she can make a distribution out to your child if they're responsible directly, and then manage whatever is in there until final distribution. Oftentimes I like lifetime trust because that's where we get all those protections I told you about, like the asset protection, the divorce protection, and being able to have tax planning. So anything in there and all the growth in there can pass on down to the next generation, estate or death tax free.
Julia, people must come out of your office with such a sense of relief because there is so much to know and there's so much to do. So when they come to your office and you can educate them, because it's got to be a real educated process, they have to feel so good after they leave your office.
That's what I see. And what is so fulfilling to me is to see that sense of relief. Even after our initial consultation, it's like, okay, now I know kind of the plan and where we're going to go, that this is going to be taken care of. And that's just a huge relief to them. And
I haven't left anything out.
Yes. And, if I have any questions, we follow up with them because we want to make sure everything is taken care of for them. And so, that time is really important. The first initial consultation it is truly an educational time, but is now, instead of something like this, just kind of general, it's really directed towards you and your situation and your desires and what's best for your family. So there may be a host, and there is a host of options out there.
Right.
But what's best for you? And let's focus on that, because that is what we need to address and understand. And you don't need to understand the universe of estate planning. You need to know what impacts you and how best to manage your funds and your estate.
I'm going to try to get one more question because this show goes by so fast. This is from Karen in Houston. She wants to know, I was told it is important to have instructions for distribution of assets. I'm 28, so does that apply to me right now?
Yes. Perfect time. So just as soon as you turn 18, really, it's time to start thinking about these things. So, as we talked about, for sure, get your legacy plan or your disability plan in place. But I like to have even just a will, even if it's not, just somebody who knows if there's any failure of beneficiary designations. But most people, depending on your situation right now, it may be that you just have some checking accounts and savings accounts and some investment accounts, maybe IRAs. And so, make sure the beneficiary designations on that are correct, but have a list of, these are where my assets are. This is, important things, my passwords. Just if you have a safe deposit box or you have a place at home that's locked, a safe, that someone knows where those things are and can get to them. So it's like my daughter knows where everything is. And so she can get to it in case there's something going on. And when things change, I'm constantly updating her on where those things are, because she's the closest one in proximity to get there and to help out and make sure everything's taken care of, whether it's our disability or our passing.
Well, we hope we've educated everybody how important it has, and that they should call you next week, make an appointment, sit down with you, go over whether you have a lot of assets or not, how important this is. There's so many decisions to make, and you don't want someone outside the family making those decisions for you. Let's give everybody your phone number and your website address.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's 281-277-3326. And my website is Julia, Julia, Dean, Dean, law, law.com. So it's just juliadeanlaw.com. And there is a contact us on the website. So it's really easy to get to us. We'll have someone personally call you back and explain our processes and get you set up for a complimentary consultation. Thank you,
And
Steve. You're wonderful.
If you've missed today's show, part of today's show, or if you want a relative to tune in, all you have to do is go to YouTube and enter Ask the Experts Houston, and you'll see estate planning, and all Julia's shows will be up online. And write again, you can text us at 954-336-3767. We've got probably about 5 or 6 questions we didn't get to today. I've got another 6 from that I didn't get to also. We will get to all your questions. Write us. We love hearing from you. Julia, have a blessed 4th of July.
Thank you. Happy Independence Day.
We love you. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you.
That was attorney Julia Dean, definitely one of our favorites. Listen, we're going to be back with you again next week with more Ask the Experts. We had one of our experts was ill today, so we missed our second half, but we will have her back on with us next week. Everybody, please stay safe. We want to see you again next week with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.